American Ninja Warrior, a show I have been fairly invested in for quite a few years now. End of the season always has a trip to Vegas to take on Mount Midoriyama, a final gauntlet featuring 4 unique stages to determine a champion. Today we'll be talking about Stage 2, which always features a very difficult final obstacle to weed out anyone who's not worthy for Stage 3. So today we'll be ranking all for the final obstacles for Stage 2 from American Ninja Warrior. Okay, no surprise for those who know, Grim Sweeper is the worst. This followed the gauntlet that was Wingnut Alley, so with the sudden retirement of it, what was going to take its place? What was a good idea on paper, and even honestly a good idea in practice, was just not brought to life in the best way. It proved to just be way too easy for a number 5 obstacle. It had almost no end of the run tension that all the others provided. 22 out of 23 made it past this obstacle, and even then it was more like 22 and a half because Kitawati had a safety pass and he managed to beat it the second time. One more fell in USA versus the world, but if you add it together, that is a 91.67% clear rate. That is terrible for an obstacle of this caliber. I actually really like it, honestly, and I think it would have been great as a time killer, because this should have been a time killer Stage 2. 3 minutes was too much. I think if you take 30 seconds off of that, you would have found a lot more people in that 50, 45 second range that are having to just go for it. Because a lot of people took 2 to 3 spins on every sweeper, and it was simply just because they had the time to. That was the safe way to do it. If you were to force dangerous methods to get across it or time out, I think this would have been a much more interesting obstacle and a lot more would have fallen. And just overall, I think it was a good idea, but just didn't have the course to fully optimize it. Alright, number 5 is the double wedge. I actually really like this one and wanted to put it higher on the list, but I couldn't quite justify it. Double wedge has a reputation as being one of the hardest obstacles ever put in American Ninja Warrior, and it's pretty easy to see why. The basic wedge alone was one of the hardest obstacles ever put in a city finals, I believe having the 4th highest knockout rate of any obstacle ever. So adding it to Mount Midoriyama was a pretty good call. It's not fast enough and wouldn't fit in Stage 1, and honestly would probably be a bit brutal for Stage 3, so Stage 2 was the best pick in my opinion. One of the hardest obstacles ever now had to transition to a second wedge right in the middle of it, and 22 feet along. The extreme difficulty was the main grab, but I think it had a few design flaws. For one, the second board was just way too close to the landing platform. You almost didn't even need to make any movements on the second board, and you could reasonably dismount off of it. It also felt just a hair slow for Stage 2 and just ate up a little more time than I think an obstacle should, but at the same time that could just be me. I think it was alright. We didn't get to see nearly as many people as last year attempt it due to the dominance of the Wave Runner, which honestly felt fitting as only the top ninjas were even able to even try it. I'd honestly like to see this one appear again, because I think even with practice, as you'll see in the next pick, this obstacle is honestly pretty unpredictable, and I don't think you get so amazing at it that it's just a given. For what it was though, I think it was a pretty worthwhile addition for the year, and I would like to see it, or even just the single variant, return someday. Okay, not technically a 5th obstacle, but we're talking about the final actual obstacles, not counting the walls. At number 4, we have the falling shelves. Following the disappointing Season 11 Stage 2 and no proper Stage 2 in Season 12, I was looking forward to the return to Vegas. Stage 2 saw a bit of a revamp, removing the said walls for the first time ever, and had a proper obstacle in slot 6. Time was pretty generous this year, but I think it actually worked, because you needed about 30 seconds to make it across and run to the buzzer. So, whatever time you had before you got to that point was a reward for going fast. The last swing had so much tension behind it and was knocking out people left and right. A lot of people had enough energy to make the grab, but with the reverse, so many just missed it and couldn't hold on, especially with the snap down after grabbing on. Had a pretty good knockout rate too, with only 4 out of 10 making it through, as compared to 22 from the year prior. This good percentage, however, was unfortunately thrown in the dumpster as everybody and their dog went home and built one, so only one person out of 12 fell the next year, being Tyler Yamauchi. This could have been the same with some of the other slot 5 obstacles that stuck around longer, but this pretty much guarantees that the falling shells will not return this year. I love the idea, I love the execution. It was just kind of sad to see that it did not live up at all the next year compared to what it did the first year. Alright, here's my controversial pick. At number 3, I have Roulette Row. Most people just did not like this obstacle and were happy it only stuck around for a year. It appeared in Season 7, the first year with a finisher on Stage 3, so Season 8 was a massive up in difficulty. The Season 7 version of Stage 2 was a little different beast, being a more skill-based challenge, the last of its kind, and that applied to Roulette Row. The original spin cycle it was based off of made its appearance in the Venice Beach Finals and followed the typical path of a Slot 3 obstacle, getting a few falls here and there. With the retirement of the medal spin, the trend of making supersized city finals obstacles for Stage 2 began. Roulette Row featured 2 hoops instead of 3, with them being about 3 times as big as the original. The distance between them was massive compared to the original and required huge dismounts to get between them. The launch off the trampoline was the most crucial part, as dismounting from the first hoop to the second stopped so many people. You got one chance to make it through all 3 dismounts, otherwise you would get hung up at some point in the middle and be stuck. Most people thought it was too easy based off of it looking very easy if you made it through smoothly. While 8 people made it through, our new record at the time, 12 others failed. Fail count second only to Wingnut Alley. The unstable bridge was a hair outdated for the time, so a bigger group than normal made it, and I'd say it actually held up pretty well in that regard. It probably would not have been as strong if it stayed for another year, so I'm glad it was changed, but I think it was a pretty respectable obstacle for the time. Number 2, we have the medal spin, the classic obstacle that defined Stage 2 for Sasuke in the early years. It was an instant classic, I think, in its 3-year run in American Ninja Warrior. This is one of my favorite obstacles of all time. The design is so unbelievably simple and even feels like it's something you see on a playground, but it proved itself to just be so deadly over the years. It does not seem the hardest when you first see it, but the huge jump and the grab, followed by the landing on the platform, proved to be pretty tough. The original Sasuke version was a little bit different, as it was all about the grab. The chains were a lot shorter, but once you held on, the dismount was basically free. You kind of had to purposely try to miss the platform. The ANW version made the grab easier, giving a little longer chains, but the landing was much harder. Season 4 and 5 versions were great in their own right, but they probably would have been a spot or 2 lower for me if it was just them. It's the Season 6 version that pushes this up to the top for me. Following a record 7 people in the prior year, a few modifications to Stage 2 were made, one being the medal spin. The landing platform was now not parallel with the starting platform, being much further away, making it way harder to land, causing it to be very easy to overshoot the platform and get stuck. And once you spun past the platform, there was essentially no way to recover. It created such heartbreaking moments as you can only watch the time count down as you hang feet away from the end. This version to me is a perfect balance for this obstacle and will work amazing as a 6th obstacle, I think, provided the time limit was low enough. Because this obstacle works best when the competitor is panicking and has to rush. I would love to see a return to this for Stage 2, because the design, the falls, the tension, everything about this obstacle is almost perfect. No surprise here. If you follow the sport, Wingnut Alley is one of the most infamous obstacles ever put on the show, and by far the deadliest on Stage 2. This obstacle was brutal, featuring 4 huge leaps to 4 hanging wingnuts, with the final leap requiring you to aim at a platform 12 feet away. Every section on this thing was deadly, as every single one of the wingnuts took out at least a couple people. Whether the impact was too much, they gassed out, or even simply missed the hole, it was taking out people left and right. The final leap saw so many heartbreaking moments as top runners like Jamie Ron, Flip Rodriguez, Daniel Gill, Adam Rail, and even he who must not be named gassed out and couldn't reach the last platform. His falls were spectacular, being so high up in the air over the water. People were flipping like crazy as they crashed into the water trying to hang on. There's a very fine line to not overshooting the wingnut, but allowing time to grab and absorb, while also not falling short and just missing. We even saw Kevin Bowl hit his head pretty hard from coming up short. Time limit on this stage 2 was generous, but it honestly had to be because this obstacle was so brutal you had to take a rest, or it probably would have been almost impossible. Style of stage 2 isn't my favorite, but it's fine as long as the last obstacle holds up, and oh boy did this one do it. 21 people failed it in the first year, only 3 making it through, those being very top quality ninjas, Najee Richardson, Sean Bryan, and Joe Moravsky. 21 falls blows all the other final obstacles out of the water, equaling every other one's count in just its first year. Less people saw it the next year, but numbers were similar, with 3 more making it through and 11 falling. Do the math, that is an 84.21% knockout rate, blowing all the other stage 2 obstacles out of the water. Fortunately, due to the sheer brutality, it's most likely why the difficulty was turned way down after Season 10, with the Grim Sweeper taking its place after only being on the show for 2 seasons. May have been short-lived, but these 2 years were, in my opinion, the best Stage 2 courses we've ever had. Well, there's the list. As always, this is just my opinion, so if you have your own, why not throw it in the comments? I'd like to take a look at it. If you liked the video, give it a like, why don't you? And if you really want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. That'd be really cool. I'm going to try to upload more consistent content like this and try to get better and better as we go on. So yeah, hope you look forward to more. And thanks. See you in the next one.